All right, good morning, everyone, and great to see you all once again in our virtual meeting room. We also welcome our online viewers, those following our seminar series on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Our fourth seminar this morning, we will, fourth seminar, or seminar number 4, we will look at China as a security threat, and it's a continuation from our discussion last week. In our discussion last week, we answered questions from the readings by Zhang and the book by Wesley Smith, edited by Wesley Smith and Smith on the China alternative. So we will continue on with our readings, and the questions once again are derived from the same readings. And to help us answer our 7 questions, we have a list of presenters. Representing Group 1, we have Ms. Joycelyn Auta, sorry. Group 2, we have Ms. Dalci Awali. Group 3, we have Mr. Philip Karulaka. Group 4, we have Mr. Tommy Kawari. Group 5, we have Ms. Valerie Balbe. Group 6, we have Ms. Isabella Narapal. And our final presenter will be Rafaela Gege, representing group number 7. So without further delay, we will now hand over the virtual microphone to Ms. Awali to lead us or start the seminar presentation. Thank you, Nancy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Egera, for giving my group and I a chance to share our view under the weekly questions for this week's seminar presentation under the theme China as a security threat and PNG's perspective on this. As introduced, I will be representing Group 2 and provide our analysis and discussion of this week's assigned questions you can read from the learning guide. Before answering the question, I would like to highlight a few background points to understanding the question itself. ODOUD 2021 examined 2 key players seeking to gain dominance over PNG's national development. These key players are China as PNG's largest trading partner and Western powers, namely Australia, as PNG's bilateral. From these background points, we came up with three main points, and the first point is what is China's interest in PNG? China's infrastructure projects in PNG are part of the Belt and Road Initiative or BRI. According to Connolly 2020, the BRI is aimed at expanding China's global influence through economic, diplomatic, and strategic investments. Developing nations like PNG, which struggle with basic services and funding, become key targets for China's expansion. While BRI offers infrastructure development through loans and economic support, it also raises concerns about debt trap diplomacy, where countries unable to repay loans risk losing control of their assets. PNG signed onto the BRI in 2018, owing China a total of $1.9 billion in concessional loans at the time. To our second point, why is the BRI in PNG a growing concern for Western powers? Western powers, particularly Australia and the US, view China's growing presence in PNG and the Pacific as a threat to regional stability and global power dynamics. Australia, as PNG's long-standing partner, sees Chinese-funded projects as a strategic risk in its regional sphere of influence. More broadly, Western nations perceive the BRI as a move towards Chinese global hegemony. So to the second point, why should PNG be concerned in this matter? According to the reading provided by ODOUD, we highlighted a point, national interest of key players. Now, the competition between China and Australia in PNG is driven by their strategic national interest. China seeks to expand its influence through soft diplomacy, funding projects in PNG's mining, logging, and fisheries sectors. However, these projects often lack transparency, contributing to environmental degradation and increased corruption within the government. In response, Australia provides aid focused on governance reforms and anti-corruption measures. Additionally, Australia views China's involvement in PNG's telecommunications and defense sectors as a security concern, prompting interventions like the 2018 $36 million cable project to counter Huawei's potential influence from PNG to Solomon Islands. PNG, however, lacks a consistent foreign policy approach, leading to shifting priorities with each government. Hence, we can pursue our national interest as an independent state diplomatically with our bilateral, regional, and multilateral partners. A fixed foreign policy could help PNG safeguard its sovereignty, enhance economic benefits, and improve international cooperation. So to answer the question, how can PNG capitalize on the competing interests of growing powers influence in the country for its own benefit without compromising its sovereignty? When we talk about a state maintaining autonomy in national development, it means to retain full control over its own policies, resources, and decision-making without external influence. O'Dowd highlights that China's debt-related risks are not driven by Chinese lending, but rather ineffective domestic policies, regulatory mechanisms, and enforcement issues allowing for exploitation from foreign companies. Not only China, but other countries also. My group and I think that PNG can better maintain its autonomy in national development by taking such strategic steps. And we came up with 2 points. The first step is to reduce dependency on China and foreign assistance. There are many other points, but I'll just briefly list one. That is to invest in other ways of economic benefit to improve infrastructure and other services in the country, such as capitalizing in agriculture and tourism, reduce excessive spending in the extractive industry sector, and the government to take full control of assets within the mining and logging industrial areas. Also, to invest equally into all government sectors or agencies so that it reduces fragmentation within the government system and all departments can perform effectively. And to improve election systems to ensure for free, fair, and safe elections, because it is through elections that leaders are voted into parliament to address regional concerns either positively or negatively. The second point is to maintain bilateral relations with competing powers by utilizing the Australian satellite technology to improve security measures like monitoring its land and sea borders, also allowing for scholarship into overseas institutions, to continue maintaining clear bilateral connections, and investing into regional partnership with the Pacific Islands for a unified voice and strengthening relationship based on mutual benefits, such as the PIF. So in summary, all the strategies can be captured in a revitalized foreign policy, which PNG needs to pursue its national interest among competing global influence in the nation's development. Our country can only be truly independent if it controls its economy. Relying too much on external influence can limit a nation's ability, such as PNG, to make independent policies and combat national and international issues on its own. Thank you, and that's the presentation.
All right, thank you, Dalcy, and thank you, Group 2, for your presentation. And I like the fact that you're thinking about reducing our dependency on China and other developed countries who are contributing to our development as a developing nation. And I hope the rest of you have taken note of the points they've shared, and if you have any comments or questions, please share in our forum for this week. Let's move on to our next presenter, representing Group 4. We have Mr. Tommy Kawari. Tommy, please go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Yegura and the PG class and C as well. So I'll be representing Group 4 to present this week on a topic China as a development partner and security threat at the same time. So our question reads, Wesley, Wesley Smith and Smith highlights the strategic dilemma faced by Pacific Island states in balancing relationship with China and traditional Western allies. How can the states navigate great power competition to avoid being drawn into security conflicts while maximizing development benefits? So before moving on to answer the question, how can the states navigate great power competition, I will define and give some example of strategic dilemma faced by the Pacific Island states. So GMSW 2025 cited in audit 2024 defines strategic dilemma as a situation where one gets to choose between two options, where each of the options has benefit. However, when choosing one, this satisfies the other. So here are some examples of strategic dilemmas between China and the Western allies among the Pacific Island nations. And the first one is security and defense. The increased defense diplomacy from both China and the US puts Pacific Island countries in a difficult position. So the Pacific, they must balance accepting military aid and security cooperation from both powers without appearing to favor one over the other. For example, rumors spread across the Pacific that China would build a military base in Darung, Western Province. In response, US negotiated and signed the US PNG military pact. Not only this, we see Australia step in and donating military vessels to our barracks, like tankers and trucks. So it is challenging for PNG government to choose between China and Western allies. The second one is economic dependency. Many Pacific Island nations rely heavily on foreign aid and investment. So China offers significant infrastructure development, infrastructure investment, and loans, while US and its allies provide development aid and economic assistance. Now, balancing this economic dependency without becoming overly reliant on one side is a delicate task for a Pacific Island nation. And the third one is climate change. Pacific Island countries are among the most vulnerable to climate change. Both China and US have different approach to climate policy aid. And navigating this difference while securing the necessary support for climate resilience is a critical challenge for a Pacific Island nation. Another challenge is geopolitical influence. The strategic location of Pacific Island countries make them become valuable allies. The US aims to counter China's influence in the region, while China seeks to expand its presence. Pacific Island nations were trying to carefully manage their diplomatic relations to avoid becoming prone in this larger geopolitical struggle. The fifth point is cultural and social impact. Now, increased engagement from both China and US brings cultural and social influence that can affect local traditions and societal structure. For example, under the fifth pillar of Papua New Guinea Strategic Development Plan 2010-2036, Papua New Guinea ways, which means development will incorporate and build upon PNG's cultural heritage. Balancing this influence while preserving our cultural identity is another significant challenge for the Pacific Island countries. The sixth point is the undersea cables. The Pacific Island is also crisscrossed by undersea cables that are vital for global communication networks. The strategic vulnerabilities and opportunities for influence lie in which actor builds and controls the undersea infrastructure, and where the connecting nodes and landing stations are situated. As technological de-risking between China and the Western progress, trusted communication networks become more valuable. An example of this is when speculation went around that China would build an undersea cable that will run from Guam to USA. Australia stepped in and execute China and build a marine cable. because Australia has evidence of how the Chinese company interfere with their network and cause cyber threat. So let me repeat myself again here. Some of the most strategic dilemmas the Pacific Island countries are stuck in are security and defense, economic dependency, climate change, marine cables, undersea cables, geopolitical influence, and a cultural and social impact. So with the definition and example of strategic dilemma in mind, we'll move on to answer the question, how can the states navigate great power competition to avoid being drawn into security conflict while maximizing development benefits? So Pacific Island states indeed face a complex strategic dilemma in balancing relationship with China and traditional Western allies. So here are some strategies they can employ to navigate great power competition effectively while they are maximizing their development. So the first one is adopting a non-alliance stance. So by maintaining a neutral position and avoid formal alliances, Pacific Island states can engage with multiple powers without being drawn into security conflicts. For example, embrace the policy of friends to all and enemy to none. This approach will allow them to benefit from development aid and investment from both China and the Western allies. And the second point is strengthening regional cooperation. Collaborating with other Pacific Island nations through regional organizations like the Pacific Island Forum can help amplify their collective voice and negotiate more favorable terms with external powers. This unity can also help address common challenges such as climate change and economic development. SIBA 2025 stated that in order to leverage the strategic competition between China and the Western powers, Pacific Island states must look to collective regional action and among themselves, like in the Blue Pacific and also the PIF, Pacific Island Forum, coming to consensus on regional security threats and must act in solidarity in prioritizing these threats in the international system. For example, Fiji leverages its membership in the regional groups like the Malaysian Spear Group and to gain political support and legitimacy during the coup in 2006. And an example is in 2022, Pacific Island members reject China's proposed regional security agreement and reinforcing their commitment to regional autonomy over external military influence. The third point is focusing on sustainable development. Prioritizing projects that promote long-term sustainability and resilience, such as renewable energy and climate adaptation initiative, can help Pacific Island state achieve development goals without becoming overly dependent on any single external power. So Ban Ki-moon states that sustainable development is a pathway to the future we want. It offers a framework to generate economic growth, active social justice, exercise environmental stewardship, and strengthening governance. The fourth point and the last point is enhance good governance and transparency. Strengthening governance and transparency can help mitigate the risk of corruption and answer the development aid issues effectively. This can also build trust with development partners and attract more investment. So in our discussion, we also come across an interesting finding. So we discussed and we found out that if the Pacific Island nation can uphold some of the strategies as we discussed to navigate great power competition effectively, they can leverage strategic competition, meaning this means that a Pacific state can use the competition between China and Western allies to their advantage by negotiating better terms for aid and investment. By playing one power against the other, they can maximize development benefit while ensuring that no single power gains excessive influence. So to conclude, now by having a unified approach with good governments adopting a non-aligned stance and prioritizing and strengthening regional issues and sustainable development, Pacific Island can now set their agendas on issues that are relevant to themselves. And by coming together as a collective, they can be more vocal in their dealing regarding decisions involving the region. By having backing from one another, Pacific Island nation can better leverage a strategic competition between China and the Western powers to their advantage without compromising their sovereignty, as their regional focus allows for future diplomatic agreements to be made in conscience with their strategic regional priority areas. And that's all for the group 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kauri, and thank you, Group, for a very interesting answer to the question. Likewise, the first group number 2, represented by Dalji Awali. Let's move on to the third presenter, Mr. Karulaka, representing Group 3. Philip, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Yagira. I'll be representing Group 3 for this week's seminar presentations. So for our topic, for our question that was given is Zheng analyzes China's foreign aid practices in the Pacific. So the question is, to what extent does China's foreign aid strategy align with its broader geopolitical interests, and how does it challenge the traditional donors in the region? So today we'll be examining China's growing role in the Pacific through its foreign aid initiatives. This presentation will look at to what extent China's aid strategy aligns with its broader geopolitical interests, and how it is challenging the established aid landscape dominated by traditional donors like Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. So the Pacific, as we all know, should know by now, is a strategically important region with a history of Western influence, which is currently witnessing a significant shift in power dynamics. And China's foreign aid is a key instrument driving this change. So before answering the question, I would like to take you guys through a few concepts and to understand why the Pacific is important. The Pacific region is important, and the characteristics of the Chinese foreign aid. Yeah. So why is the Pacific so important? The region, comprising numerous small island nations, is strategically vital due to geographical location, which is the first one. Control over key sea lanes of communication is crucial for global trade and military power projection. The second one is UN voting bloc. Most of the Pacific Island nations collectively represent a significant voting bloc in the United Nations, relevant for securing votes on international issues. The third one is resource access, potential access to undersea resources and fishing grounds. Okay, China's approach to foreign aid, it differs from traditional Western models, and we discussed and came up with, found out about key characteristics. So the first one is non-strings attached approach. This means they offer financial help, infrastructure projects, and other assistance to countries without demanding specific political or economic reforms in return. Unlike some Western aid programs that might require things like democratic elections or change in economic policy. So China generally focuses on mutual benefit and respect for sovereignty. This approach has been praised for empowering recipient countries, but also criticized for potentially supporting governments with poor human rights records or unsustainable practices. Ultimately, it's a different philosophy of development assistance. The second one is infrastructure focus. It emphasizes large-scale construction projects instead of direct financial handouts, and they invest in building roads, railways, ports, and power plants in developing countries. Think of it as helping countries by building foundations. They need to grow their own economies. So this approach aims for long-term development, but has also been criticized for potential debt traps and environmental concerns. The third one is bilateral agreements, which are simply exclusive deals between China and another country. Instead of working with international organizations like UN, China directly partners with individual nations. The fourth one is concessional loans. These are loans with benefits. They offer lower interest rates and longer repayment periods than typical commercial loans. This makes them more appealing to developing countries by easing the financial burden of infrastructure projects and other development initiatives. So while they still need to be repaid, these loans are designed to be more affordable and less risky than borrowing from private lenders. They are a key part of China's economic diplomacy. Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, how does these aid strategies align with China's broader geopolitical goals? So we came up with 3 points. The first one is economic leverage. China's foreign aid is often tied to investments in infrastructure and natural resource extraction, as in 2022. And this economic strategy serves dual purposes. It enhances the immediate capacity of Pacific nations and ensuring resource access for China. So by investing in infrastructure projects such as roads and ports, China often gains leverage over these nations, further consolidating its influence. So the second one is diplomatic relationships. China's foreign aid is also a tool for establishing and nurturing diplomatic relationships. Through aid, China has successfully secured alliances with Pacific nations, which might otherwise be inclined towards traditional donors like United States, Australia, and New Zealand. So by prioritizing relationships with countries such as the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, China demonstrates its intention to reshape the geopolitical landscape. The third point is soft power strategy. The aid policy serves as an extension of China's soft power strategy, where cultural diplomacy complements economic incentives. By promoting educational exchanges and cultural ties alongside financial aid, China enhances its image in the Pacific region. This multi-faceted engagement helps counteract the traditional dominance of Western ideology. The second part of the question, how does China foreign aid strategy challenge the traditional donors in the region? So we came up with 3 points. The first point is competition for influence. China is giving a lot of money to Pacific Island countries, offering them a different option than relying on help from Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. Because of this, the influence of these countries is getting weaker. Now they have to think about how they give aid and try to be faster, bigger, and more helpful to compete with China. The second point is undermining good governance standards. So rich countries usually want aid to promote things like honest government and protecting the environment. So China focuses more on building roads and growing economies. Sometimes without paying as much attention to these things, this can cause problems. Countries receiving aid might end up with too much debt, damage the environment, or face more corruption. That point is shifting geopolitical dynamics. China is giving more aid to Pacific countries, which is changing who has the most influence in the region. So countries that used to be the main helpers are now facing competition. So to stay important, they're having to change how they work with these countries or things like security and diplomacy. So this means that they might offer more help themselves and try harder to build relationships to keep with China's growing influence. To conclude, China's helping in the Pacific nations. It's also about power. They're giving aid which the region needs, but it puts them in competition with countries that have traditionally helped. So there's concern this could weaken good government practices and change the power balance in the area. So we need to understand all sides of this. It's important to think about what China's aid means for the future and the Pacific's independence, and if it will actually lead to a better life for the people here in the region. Thank you.
Thank you to Group 3 and your representative, Mr. Karulaka. Thank you for a really comprehensive answer. We will move on to our next presenter, but please do not forget our inquiry questions for this week, week 5. The first question is, how significant is the rise of China? And the second question is, how will China's rise reshape the international and regional security landscape? So while listening to your peers share the answers, also try your best to answer our inquiry questions for this week. Let's listen to our group representative from Group 7. From Group 7, we have Ms. Gegeo Rafaela. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Yagera and fellow classmates, including our friends from the Communications Department. So I will be representing Group 7 to discuss with you what we have found in the reading to answer the question that was allocated to our group. So our question reads, NetBob discusses the mixed perceptions of Chinese economic activities in Papua New Guinea. How do these perceptions shape public opinion about pardon me.
Apologies, everyone. I will use Novitina's computer to present on behalf of our group. So thank you. Once again, apologies for that. So back to our question. MedBob discusses the mixed perceptions of Chinese economic activities in PNG. How do these perceptions shape public opinion about China's presence, and what role does this play in influencing PNG's foreign policy towards China? So the main question was broken down into two separate questions, so the group would answer the questions accordingly. These two questions are: how do mixed perceptions of Chinese economic activities shape public opinion about Chinese presence? And what role does this play in influencing PNG's foreign policy towards China? Now, before we answer these two questions, it is important that the group highlight what these mixed perceptions are. So the perceptions of Chinese economic activities in PNG are quite complex. In Chapter 15, MedBob 2021 discusses the tensions arising in the presence of Chinese traders and their activities in PNG. He explains that while earlier Chinese communities integrated well into the PNG society, the recent influx of migrants has led to a more separate rift between the two, leading to cultural and economic friction. Now, these mixed perceptions can be categorized into different groups: positive perceptions, which pertain to Chinese contributions to which are economic development, and negative perceptions, which discusses the concerns of Chinese business practices and its influence, and mixed perceptions indicating skepticism to Chinese aid and funding. So onto the positive perceptions. Chinese traders play a major role in PNG's economy, particularly in retail, by increasing the availability of goods, services, and infrastructural development. Secondly, many Papua New Guineans acknowledge that Chinese businesses contribute to economic growth by creating jobs, and this is evident in most Papua New Guinean societies. Third, PNG government has looked to China for aid and investment and has benefited from China's boomerang concessional loans. Onto the negative perceptions: business competition and local displacement. So many local business owners feel that Chinese enterprises, particularly in retail and construction, dominate markets and push out PNG-owned businesses. Secondly, despite Chinese traders playing a vital role in PNG's economy through retail, this gives competition to the local vendors and the quality of imported products as opposed to local products. Onto the mixed perceptions, there is an increase in Chinese migrants. However, there is also an increase in the investments in Papua New Guinea, resentment and concerns that the Chinese are taking slices of our businesses. Next is there are also concerns on whether the Chinese aid are beneficial to Papua New Guinea government. There are also concerns on whether the Chinese aid are beneficial to Papua New Guineans or whether they are just white elephants. So this shows that the government may be more subtle with some skepticism about the impact of Chinese economic activities. Now, on to our main discussion, which is answering the two questions. So the first question is, how do these mixed perceptions of Chinese economic activities shape public opinion about Chinese? These perceptions shape public opinion about China's presence in PNG. Chinese businesses are seen drivers of PNG's economy, job creators, and providers of affordable goods and services. However, local businesses often perceive them as with significant backlash due to their unfair competition resulting from their pricing strategies and supply chains, which leads to resentment from locals and cultural separation, thus affecting the view of Chinese presence in the country. On to the second question. What role does this play in influencing PNG's foreign policy towards China? The misperception of Chinese economic activities in PNG significantly influences the country's foreign policy towards China. While many view Chinese investments as beneficial for economic growth and infrastructure development, there are also concerns of potential debt dependency and loss of sovereignty. This duality forces PNG policymakers to carefully balance the economic advantages against the risks of over-reliance on China, shaping a cautious approach to their foreign policy decisions. Wesley Smith and Smith, 2021. These perceptions are shaped by various factors, including 1, economic benefits. As stated by Medbob in chapter 15 of the China Alternative book, the relations between Papua New Guinea and China have been fruitful and is evident, and I quote, on ground with a number of large infrastructure projects such as roads, stadiums, conference centers and institutions, as well as China's biggest investment project in the Pacific, the $800 million Ramu Nickel project, end quote, Medbob 2021. These investments have created jobs, improved infrastructure, and contributed to economic growth. Number 2, social impacts. There are concerns about the social impacts of Chinese economic activities. Issues such as labor abuses, exploitation, and the living conditions of these guest workers have been reported. These negative perceptions can lead to calls for stricter regulations and oversight of Chinese investments, influencing PNG's foreign policy to ensure that economic cooperation does not come at the expense of social welfare. Number 3, strategic partnerships. The signing of all MOUs covering various sectors such as disaster relief, ICT cooperation, and protocols underscores the commitment to strengthening bilateral relations. These agreements reflect PNG's pragmatic approach to leveraging Chinese investments for national development while addressing concerns through diplomatic channels. And number 4 is public sentiment as a policy driver. Public opinion plays a crucial role in shaping PNG's currency. When citizens express concerns about Chinese influence, policymakers may feel pressure to adopt a more skeptical stance towards China. This can lead to a foreign policy that seeks to engage with China while simultaneously establishes to protect national interests, transparency, and
I think there's something. Okay, you're back. All right, sorry.
Yes, this can lead to a foreign policy that seeks to engage with China while simultaneously establishing measures to protect national interests and ensure transparency in dealings. For example, the 2016 British public voted to leave the European Union is a prime example of public opinion directly shaping foreign policy. The decision led to significant changes in UK's trade, immigration, and diplomatic relations. Electoral Commission 2016. In summary, the perception of Chinese economic activities in PNG play a significant role in shaping the country's foreign policy towards China. Policymakers must navigate social benefits, strategic partnerships, as well as public sentiment to effectively guide and shape PNG's foreign policy towards China. This balancing act is essential for maintaining PNG's autonomy and ensuring that its national interests are safeguarded in the face of external influences. Thank you, and that brings me to the end of Group 7's discussion.
Thank you, Group 7, and thank you, Ms. Gegeo. We now move on to our next presenter. That is Ms. Valerie Balbe, and she'll be representing group number 5. So Valerie, let's hear what you have to say, or your answer to your question on Tabuka Taulaka's chapter.
Hello, can you guys hear me? All right. Good morning, Mr. Yegura and fellow PGIS and CA colleagues. I will be presenting Group 5's response to our given question for this week, which is, according to Kabu Taulaka, Pacific Island leaders have prioritized non-traditional security concerns like climate change over external military threats. How does this approach challenge the narratives of external powers, including China's strategic initiatives in the region? Pacific Island leaders, as noted by Kabu Taulaka, have prioritized non-traditional security concerns such as climate change over traditional external military threats. This shift in focus redefines the concept of security in the Pacific, framing it around human security and environmental sustainability rather than military-centric security models, often emphasized by external powers like China, the USA, and Australia. Before we go on, let us first define and differentiate non-traditional security and external military threats. Non-traditional security refers to challenges that arise primarily from non-military sources and are often transnational in nature. This includes issues such as climate change, resource scarcity, natural disasters, and irregular migration, which directly affect the survival and well-being of populations. In contrast, external military threats are typically defined as risks posed by foreign nations or armed groups that threaten a country's sovereignty and stability through military force. Moving on, the Bow Declaration 2018 encapsulates this shift in the Pacific, recognizing climate change as the greatest threat to the region's livelihoods, security, and well-being. This reframing emphasizes a human security approach that prioritizes the protection of people and communities over territorial defense. According to the United Nations Development Programme 2023, climate change poses an existential threat to Pacific Island nations, with rising sea levels and extreme weather patterns directly affecting their communities and resources. This non-traditional security approach challenges the security narratives of external powers, including China's strategic initiatives in the region, in several key ways. First, reformulating security priorities. Pacific Island leaders focus on climate change and other non-traditional security concerns, pushes the region's security discourse away from military and geopolitical issues, which have historically dominated external powers' agendas, while countries like China and the US have been deeply invested in the region for military and economic reasons. This shift challenges the strategic initiatives, particularly as climate change becomes a more urgent concern for the Pacific. Second, regional security as a strategic tool. The prioritization of climate security enables Pacific Island nations to form a more unified regional voice and assert their autonomy. This opens the door for new partnerships focused on climate change mitigation and sustainability. For example, Pacific Islands may seek stronger bilateral ties with countries like Denmark, a leader in climate policy, or with Southeast Asia and Caribbean nations that share similar environmental concerns. While China remains a potential partner, its strategic interests in the region are often perceived as prioritizing its own geopolitical and economic goals over the Pacific Islands' pressing climate concerns, making it a secondary choice for climate-related collaboration. And lastly, promoting regional autonomy. By emphasizing non-traditional security threats, the Pacific Islands assert their regional autonomy, resisting external influence that often prioritizes military or economic agendas. This empowers the region to negotiate partnerships on their terms, focusing on environmental security and the protection of human livelihoods rather than military alliances. In conclusion, Pacific Island nations focus on non-traditional security issues, particularly climate change, is reshaping the region's security agenda. This approach challenges the traditional military-centric security frameworks advanced by external powers like China, the US, and Australia, and establishes the Pacific Islands as more autonomous and empowered players in global security discussions. The region is increasingly seeking climate-focused partnerships that align with their unique needs, creating a new regional security landscape centered on human and environmental security rather than military influence. Thank you, and that is all from Group 5.
Thank you, Group 5 and Ms. Balbe, for a comprehensive answer. And I believe so far all 5 presenters have shared with us great insights as well as points in relation to the questions, and hope all of you are taking note of what they are presenting. We'll now move on to our next presenter representing group number, let's see, group 1. Okay, representing group 1, we have Ms. Joycelyn Auta, and after Ms. Joycelyn Auta, we'll have the rep for group 6, Ms. Isabella Narapa. Joycelyn, let's listen to what you have to share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Yagura. Good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, I will be presenting on behalf of Group 1 for this seminar, number 4 in week 5. Now, the statement that we were given was, according to Matbob, economic activities involving Chinese traders have both benefits and risks for local communities. How might reliance on Chinese businesses influence PNG's sovereignty and social cohesion? Firstly, to start off, let us look at the number of businesses owned and operated by Chinese here in PNG. There are a number of sectors, however, here we have mentioned only 3. Number 1, mining and resources. We have Ramon Eco Management, or MCC Limited, which is a Chinese company operating here in Madang. Secondly, under mining and resources, we have Porgera Gold Mine, where we have Zijin Mining in partnership with Barrick and operating in Enga, according to Kennedy 2021. Secondly, under trade and retail, we have retail and wholesale. You can imagine all these Chinese-owned businesses in our local communities and towns and cities. These businesses provide employment opportunities for many nationals or locals, alleviating employment issues and having an impact on the socioeconomic issues in local communities. And thirdly, infrastructure. Through BRI, there are significant contributions to PNG's infrastructural developments. Engineering construction companies that wins the contract to construct are mostly and mainly Chinese companies. According to Business Advantage 2022, there were figures released on Chinese companies and their presence here in PNG, which was made possible through studies by researchers attached to the non-for-profit, Asian Foundation. Studies revealed that there are 48 large Chinese enterprises which have arrived in PNG in the last 2 to 3 decades. 50% of these large companies are concentrated in PNG's construction sector, with an intense competition among Chinese enterprises. 15% are concentrated in energy, while just under 15% are focused on resources such as fishery, forestry, and mining. And the remaining 20% is divided between retail and trading and other sectors such as real estate, telecommunication, and financial services. All these were results from the study by the Asian Foundation and associate research officers from the Development Policy Center in Australian National University. Now that we've put into numbers the presence of Chinese businesses in PNG, we can also see how much it contributes to development in terms of economic growth and infrastructure in PNG. These economic activities involving Chinese traders have both benefits and risks for local communities. Benefits such as employment opportunities, as I have mentioned earlier, provides services to communities at district or local level where the government cannot serve, and it also exposes PNG consumers to products sold at international level. Now, some risks are as follows. Number one, the Chinese have taken over businesses once operated and owned by locals. Secondly, they sell a wide variety of cheap goods which are of poor quality. Also, they sell counterfeit products which are usually imitations of popular brands. And thirdly, they sell substandard food that pose health risks to consumers in Papua New Guinea. And finally, Chinese migrants are operating businesses reserved for only PNG nationals, such as Kaibas. Now, if you look at policies such as the Employment and Industrial Relations Act 2004, the National Employment Policy, the PNG National Content Policy 2023, and others by the national government, they outlines more on economic activities, businesses, and how the businesses are to operate in Papua New Guinea. All these policies are set in place to allow for business development opportunities, economic opportunities, skills, and workforce development. These are basically about national participation for economic growth. Now, moving on to answering the question, how might reliance on Chinese businesses influence PNG's sovereignty and social cohesion? We've broken down the question into two. Firstly, let's look at the reliance on Chinese business influence on PNG sovereignty, keeping in mind the number of enterprises that are present in Papua New Guinea. Now, according to Britannica 2025, sovereignty in political theory is the ultimate overseer or authority in the decision-making process of the state and in maintenance of order. Matpop stated that PNG has been plagued by rampant corruption for years now, with Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index 2018 placing the country at a low on 138 out of 180 countries. The widespread corruption in PNG affects everyone, citizens, foreigners alike, and Chinese are no exception. It can take the form of bribes or commissions on Chinese retailers paid to police or government officers to obtain protection from criminal elements, gain access to land, property, or licenses to operate a business, or get quick services from government agencies. It can also take the form of paying kickbacks on the supply of equipment and services to government departments or state enterprises. The PNG government has strict laws that govern the use of public funds through the provincial and district treasuries. Yet, politicians and administration heads continue to find ways to gain access to these funds illegally and do so without fear of being arrested and prosecuted. Hence, corruption in the government has affected the sovereignty of the PNG government. Another way of how PNG's sovereignty can be influenced by these Chinese companies or businesses is through the effect of its dependency on China economically. As we have stated in our discussion, which I mentioned, now we can see that PNG relies on China for economic opportunities as well for its locals. PNG now has the possibility of attracting an economic dependency syndrome. In some way, PNG's economy can be controlled and influenced by external pressures and factors which can greatly influence the government's ability to make important decisions and independent choices that will serve its national interest and its economy. So secondly, to social cohesion. Social cohesion as defined by Springer 2025 refers to the extent of connectedness and solidarity among groups in society. A classic example on how it is influenced by these businesses is the major issue with the Ramo Nickel project, where there was abuse of PNG laws by allowing Chinese workers who could not speak a word of English or Tokpisin and who had dubious expertise to enter the country in large numbers. The Department of Labor intervened, arresting 178 illegal migrants and taking them to court. Eventually, then Chief Magistrate John Lomapo found that the workers had not really broken any laws because they were brought into the country under a special state-to-state agreement. However, in an interview in 2007, then regional MP for Madang, Sir Peter Bata, urged the Chinese to understand the seriousness of the situation and begin to improve their relations with landowners. The people and their employers, by learning how to speak Tokpisin or English, so they can communicate well with PNG workers and mainly landowners about issues or day-to-day communication about work at the Ramo Nickel organization to create a friendly environment. Therefore, this example shows that Chinese businesses do and influence the social cohesion between the Chinese workers and the PNG workers at the Ramo Nickel cobalt mine. Social cohesion can be also affected when nationals are aware of their rights or the responsibilities of businesses outlined under the national content policy, as I have mentioned, especially in terms of social corporate responsibility and community engagement for projects by these large companies, which will benefit the locals. A classic example, I believe this may not be related to any Chinese business directly. However, it is one that I believe is worth mentioning was when Dr. Kiru's decision in mobilizing clans in Southern Highlands for digging up ditches to impede or halt, put a cease to the PNG LNG operations up there so that the company would attend to locals. We believe that they were well aware of what the company was missing in terms of compensating them. So out of the dissatisfaction, they had to take action, which resulted in conflict between the company and the people. So we can say to some, we can say that the Chinese businesses and their presence can influence the government's decision and have an impact on its sovereignty and the social cohesion. This is the answer for our question for this seminar on the Chinese as a security threat and PNG's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Group 1, and thank you, Ms. Auta, for sharing with us your detailed answer. We now move on to our final presenter for this morning. She'll be using Ms. Grace Cowley's account to share answer with us, or a group's answer. Please, Ms. Narapal, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? I am Isabella Narapal, and I will be representing Group 6 for this session. The question given to us is, Key discusses the environmental and social implications of China's infrastructure projects under the BRI. How can Pacific Island states ensure that such projects adhere to regional sustainability goals without compromising on development needs? Before answering the question, Key mentioned in its chapter that the Belt and Road Initiative, or otherwise known as BRI, incorporates over 60 countries in a transnational network that comprises of land and ocean-based infrastructure. It further states that the inclusion of Oceania appears as anomaly because of where the region is located and how it is not directly linked to the ports and cities in Europe and Africa. The word anomaly is used because of the peculiar location of the region compared to Africa and Europe. There is no direct connection to the ports and cities of Europe and Africa. So the Republic of China maintains diplomatic relations with 10 Pacific Island countries, which are Fiji, Samoa, PNG, Vanuatu, Micronesia, Cook Islands, Tonga, Niue, Solomon Islands, and Kiribati. Some of the projects, according to Szewski, include PNG, an upgrade to the road systems in the mainland, the construction of an industrial park in Sandaun, and an improvement of water supply in Eastern Islands. In Tonga, trade and financing benefits in the form of a memorandum of understanding and a 5-year deferment on concessional loans. And in Vanuatu, a multi-million-dollar revival of the Gold Ridge mine and the construction of facilities for the Pacific Games. So the question, how can Pacific Island states ensure that such projects adhere to regional sustainability goals without compromising on development needs? Firstly, we must know and understand the regional sustainable goals for Pacific states and the development needs. Sustainable regional goals for Pacific states include universal energy access, climate change adaptation, and economic growth. Under energy, it focuses on increasing of renewable energy in the energy mix, improving energy efficiency in transportation, industry, and buildings, collecting and analyzing energy-related data, and making institutional, legislative, and regulatory reforms in the energy sector. On climate change, it focuses on adapting to climate change, such as sea level rise, ocean warming, and acidification. And economic growth is to stimulate economic growth, enhancing political governance and security, and strengthening regional cooperation and integration. So sustainable development is about ensuring that all Pacific people benefit from sustainable development, empowering and making Pacific communities and cultures resilient, and helping all Pacific people reach their full potential and live long and healthy lives. Secondly, the development needs. The Pacific region's key development needs include strengthening economic diversification beyond resilience on fisheries, improving infrastructure, addressing climate change impacts, enhancing access to quality education and healthcare, promoting sustainable resource management, developing strong governance structures, and fostering private sector growth, all while considering the unique challenges of geographically dispersed small island nations and their vulnerability to natural resources. So basically, how do the listed projects above follow regional sustainability guidelines as well as achieve developmental needs? Some approaches to take are leverage international standards and cooperation. Pacific Island states can work with international organizations such as the United Nations, World Bank, or World Health Organization to make sure that infrastructure projects meet high global standards for sustainability and environmental protection. Working together with these stakeholders may also help to secure funding for technical assistance for ensuring that projects do not sacrifice long-term sustainability for short-term development. For instance, Pacific Island states, climate change is a big issue for all the states. This is why most states incorporate real solutions to their agreements. With BRI initiative, there is a coalition with the UN called the Belt and Road Green Development Coalition, which basically promotes environment sustainable development with its infrastructure development in the Pacific. There is a very good example on a way that can help the development needs of a state while addressing a state's environmental suitable needs. Second point, diversify development partners. While the BRI offers significant structured investment, the Pacific Island states must not rely mostly on Chinese financing and expertise. Diversifying their development partners such as Australia, New Zealand, or Japan-led initiatives can introduce alternative sources of funding, expertise that are more associated with the region's sustainability priorities. And the last point is debt-free means exclusion of poverty. Sadowski writes that many of the infrastructural projects under the BRI are sourced through loans or concessional loans. Although it is good for development, island states will still need to pay back loans, some of which are beyond a reimbursement budget and can be labeled as social and even political implications. That is why these island nations can look into more concessional loans or grants and review the term and conditions rigorously. This will help to decrease the debt and ensure that it is payable. That in turn will work towards decreasing poverty in the region, but also slowly addressing their developmental needs. So by implementing these strategies, Pacific Island states can ensure that BRI projects contribute positively to their development needs while adhering to the region's sustainability goals. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Isabella, and thank you, Grace, as well. And we also thank Group 6. So we've come to the end of our seminar presentation. We've listened to all the 7 presenters, presented their answers to the 7 different questions allocated to the groups. And if you have any questions or comments for students, you can use our week 5 forum for further discussions. And to those on YouTube, there's a commenting segment underneath or beneath the video. So you can share your comments or questions if you have any questions or comments for our presenters and myself as well. So I thank you all for joining us in this seminar, and we will meet again for our next seminar, Seminar 5, next week, which will be on cybersecurity. We'll move on to our next topic for the next 2 weeks. That will be cybersecurity and digital changes in PNG. And we've now ended 2 weeks of talking about China and whether or not it's a threat. So like I said, it goes back to you all individually, your assessment, your analysis. Do you think it's a threat? You've read a lot about what China is doing. Some of you will be journalists, some of you will be analysts, some of you will be researchers in the years to come after you graduate next year. So you have to form your own perspective whether or not you think China is a genuine development partner or China is a security threat. And if we interact with China more often, then we'll create instability in the regional system or international system. That's for you people to decide. So continue on with the discussion and read more about China and what China is doing in the region as well as globally and its association with other major powers in world politics. So that is all for today, and thank you all. We will have a great day and we'll meet again for our next seminar presentation.